Welcome to the August edition of the Accounts Reconciliation webinars put together by Precise Financial Systems Limited. And in this August edition, we'll treat the right processes for effective accounts reconciliation. And even to do justice to this subject are Dr. Yele Okiremi, the MD CEO of Precise Financial Systems, Mr. Moshood Adeloton, the managing partner, Turn It Up Digital Solutions Limited, Mrs. Ellen Agime, the head of sales, Precise Financial Systems Limited, and Mr. Philip Ayeni, the deputy managing director of Precise Financial Systems Limited. Please listen and enjoy.
The right reconciliation approach is taken, and you get the right result. So what do we mean by this? These are steps that basically you adopt to ensure you have a good reconciliation. And the very first one there is data collection, because if you are reconciling anything, you must be working with some data. There's some information you want to reconcile. The word reconciliation itself means trying to match or ensure completeness, accuracy, and correctness of transactions. So meaning that there must be data for transactions that you want to reconcile. That's the first. So you must do data collection. You must have a set of data that you want to reconcile. You don't just reconcile in vacuum or in the space. So there must be data. That's the first basic step. And you must equally collect the right data. So not just collecting data, collect the right data in the right format and appropriately. That's the first and basic step, okay? Now, after collecting data, what next do you do? Since you want to reconcile, it means you want to match the items in that data, because the act of reconciliation itself is to be able to ensure that what goes in or what comes out are what it's supposed to be, and they all match. So the next step after collecting of data is you match the entries. You look for similar items and knock them off and say, yes, these are compensating transactions, they balance out. And what that gives you is it now throws up some outstanding or strange items that you cannot match. Now, so after you have matched, which is the first step in trying to reconcile after collecting data, you now match, it now throws up some items that perhaps you cannot put in specific locations. But the next thing is to review those set of items. When you review them, you try to validate. When you validate, you try to understand what is going on, and you must treat those items, i.e., you will now have to identify the right location or the right treatment for those things. And that comes about, you have to produce a report of reconciliation. So you've collected data, you've matched data, you've thrown up some strange items or unreconciled items in quote, then you will now submit a report for review. And you must continue to monitor what happens to those items to ensure you do a reconciliation or a full reconciliation process. So basically, in a nutshell, that is what the standard processes entails in the standard reconciliation process. I think that's what I will stop by for now, and let's move on to the next item. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm very sure by the time we begin to unpack each of those three items you just mentioned, I'm very sure our audience will understand better. But I want to call on Dr. Okiremi. Do you have any slight inputs you just want to add to what Moshood just said?
Well, thank you very much, Philip. I think Moshood has given it a fantastic shot already, and very little or nothing to add. But let me just make a simple note that we need to keep the end game in mind. The essence of reconciliation must be borne in mind from the very outset. And to my mind, people must note that the essence of reconciliation is doing whatever we are doing is remedial actions to protect assets and ensure propriety of liabilities. So while it might be very difficult to say a straitjacket set of rules and regulations applied from organization to organization or from account to account we must bear that end game in mind. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Okeremi.
So our next speaker will be taking us on transaction monitoring, start to finish. We'll be talking about the front end and coding standard. Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you,
Okeremi.
Helen. Yeah, thank you. And I think I heard you well enough to be able to answer your question. So, like I had, Moshood had said, that when you are trying to reconcile, it's a game of data because you are comparing two books representing the same transactions. All right? And so you want, first of all, these two books are expected to be independent, but they represent the two transactions and you want to agree them together. And so this is a game that is very data intensive. Not only is it data intensive, you also want, and Moshood spoke about that when he spoke about standards, you want to ensure that both parties that are keeping these records are maintaining the records in approximately the same standards or understanding. And I give a simple example. For example, if you have a dollar account in your bank is maintaining that account in dollars. So every time you go to withdraw money, you are withdrawing the money in dollars. The bank will debit you $2,000. When you pay money there, they credit you $10,000. How are you maintaining your own books? Are you keeping your own books in Naira? In which case, dollar exchange rates can fluctuate on a daily basis. Now, these are some of the challenges that can happen. And so the first thing you want to do, like I said, is ensuring that both parties are maintaining this record with similar understanding. So that whenever you want to compare the records, I will be able to see a $200 debit in the books of the bank and represent it as a $200 credit in my books. And there's only one way this is possible. In determining the type of ERP or accounting system that I use, if I am going to be trading in currencies other than my own local currency, the first thing I must bear in mind is that my accounting system or ERP must be multi-currency. Now, if it is not a multi-currency ERP, I'm already running into the first problem. Now, there are so many other things you want to do. On the other hand, it is also possible, like I said, when people are paying certain allowances and you have 40 people on the same cadre, you are paying them 350, 5,000 naira a week. Each week, 35 people. And you are going to see so many debits of 355,000 in your bank statements. How are you representing the credits? Is there something that makes sure that each of the 355,000 credits in my books ties to each 355,000 debits? So if I'm using straight journal posting in my own system, and I am not able to capture certain references to effectively identify each unique transaction, then already I'm creating problems for myself. So each organization must be prepared to have the appropriate infrastructure to be able to get themselves prepared for effective reconciliation. Thank you.
In essence, Dr. Okeremi, what you just said is that the accounting system or the ERP or banking system, as the case may be, that the front ends must be such that they capture the necessary information and that the accounts should actually be able, the two accounts being reconciled should be able to mirror one another for the transactions that will be reconciled, right? I got that very, very clearly. Now, I also, before I call on Moshood, I also want you to elaborate a little more on the coding standard. Yes, we know that this ERP must be there. How about ensuring that when they push these transactions on these varied accounting systems or core applications they use in tracking their books, are they going to ensure that the coding standards will be such that will make reconciliation a very easy exercise for them to carry out? Dr. Okeremi, please elaborate.
Yes, actually, I fired a shot at it earlier, but I didn't elaborate. And that's why I said, are we capturing essential unnecessary information. And that's why I said, for example, where we see people who just pass those entries using journals, in which case the narration is free text. So somebody, you are paying somebody's salary, for example, and then the person that is narrating or posting the transaction say, being money paid to Mr. Moshood Adelotan when his wife wanted to take their son to London for vacation. That does not carry sufficient information for reconciliation. Because by the time the bank is debiting you, they are just probably quoting the check number that you have written.
Yeah.
You have issued a check. And the bank says check 204 in favor of Mr. Adelotan. But meanwhile, you have told a story about Mr. Adelotan's wife going on summer holiday with the children. And therefore, one of the problems is when you give so much room to human beings to use discretion, there are possibilities of errors, there are possibilities of misconceptions. And therefore, it is always advisable for organizations to try as much as possible to adopt what we call the use of front-end systems. Front-end systems are the applications that allow you to supply minimum details of the information, and the system is structured in a friendly manner to pass the narration appropriately. So that every time you issue a check, the check number will be quoted in the narration. If you want to put other stories about Mr. Adelotan's child going to pay school fees, you are welcome, but ensure that the check number that is going to be an essential ingredient for reconciliation is captured.
Okay, thank you very much. In other words, the front ends should be able to actually enforce the discipline of capturing essential information that will be required for reconciliation system. Okay, just in a minute, Moshood, you all want me to add to what Dr. Okeremi just said?
Okay,
front ends and coding standards.
Thank you very much, Philip. I mean, when a doctor speaks, what more do you want to add? However, I mean, because we're professional colleagues and we have worked together for long, I totally understand all he's saying. All I would just say is, what he's simply saying in a nutshell is, for any business or any organization, and like he said, he started by saying you must have the end game of a reconciliation process in mind. So what it means to is to have that end game in mind, or the end state in mind, means you will start where. And in starting where means you will define your transactions appropriately. And that's when I mentioned data collection, and I said data collection, appropriate data, meaning that you will not go and bring up narratives of the story around my wife traveling and try to match with anything. You must define transactions by a unique identifier. He has mentioned for check. For checks, you use check number. I mean, all of us are aware of ATM transactions. You go to one ATM machine, there are million transactions on that ATM in a day. There are multiples of 10,000 other transactions. How do you identify them? And that's why you must define. That's why you see they use PAN number. They use different things so that you must define and agree. Because again, like we always say in IT world, garbage in, garbage out. If you don't feed your ERP or reconciliation system with the right information, you will end up with garbage as the outcome of your reconciliation. So, like I said, Doctor has nailed it properly. I only needed to add that point that to make it simple for some of our audience is you need to define transaction mnemonics appropriately and have a unique identification for them. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Moshood. Before I call my colleague to call in the next discussant, I want to actually let the audience know that you can push in your questions. Okay, please put it in the chat box and we'll see how we can attend to them. The ones we can attend to on this particular occasion, this edition we will do, and if we need to get back to you privately, we will do just that. But please begin to push in your questions. I call on my Helen. Helen, colleague, please say the next question.
Thank you, Mr. Ayeni. Now we'll be looking into control and supervision. Once again, I'll be calling on Mr. Adelotan, and he'll be taking us on account allocation.
Okay. Thank you again, Ellen. Now, you know, we're taking these things step by step. We started by saying you define the steps and processes for the right reconciliation. Then you look at the front end and coding and all the rest. Now the next step is to be able to control. And when we say control, you see, you must understand one basic thing with reconciliation, that there are certain things that need to be in place. Whether you are trying to do a manual reconciliation or an auto reconciliation or whatever. So the first thing is you need to allocate accounts. I mean, accounts allocation. That is, accounts are properly assigned and allocated to do specific transactions and for who will manage them as well. The next thing is you will set timelines for reconciliation as well as for the review and the feedback. So when you do this, what it means is you are able to understand what goes into which account and which account is being reviewed or reconciled, and what are the timelines, what are the frequencies. So you just have to define.
Okay, Moshood, can I come in a little? Yes, before you go into setting timelines, okay? Please, let's trash out the accounts allocation. And you know, part of the discipline of control, or the accountant will tell you, is segregation of duties.
Sure.
Why is it necessary to distribute accounts, among respective account reconciliation officer? Why is it necessary? And when these allocations are done, must every one of them be aware of what has been allocated to other colleagues in terms of fulfilling or enforcing the discipline of segregation of duty? Let's trash out the accounts allocation first.
Okay, thank you very much again.
Quickly.
You are very correct. When you allocate accounts to individuals or teams, it is one, like you said, to segregate the functions and duties. And remember, especially in financial transactions, you don't want to have one single person start and end a process of transaction, because it means you are not being transparent and you are leaving room for manipulation. So you must have a kind of dual control approach to it. So whoever is reconciling one particular account, depending on the functions or the use of that account, you will have to ensure that that person is not reconciling another account that perhaps should ordinarily throw out exceptions or balance out whatever is happening in that account. And that's why you have to allocate appropriately. That's one. Two is the fact that you want people to be focused, and you are assign accounts to based on expertise and skill set, because you want the best as an outcome of your reconciliation process. You don't just say, for the purpose of okay, I have 10 staff, just say 2 accounts per staff to reconcile. No, you must look at their competencies, their capabilities, their capacity to deliver, and the kind of accounts. For instance, you don't tell a salesperson in a sales function to reconcile the sales activities, because he's the one doing the sales. And if you just give the same person the same thing, either for want of, you may not have any negative thing in mind, but the fact that it's the same person doing the sales, to reconcile might be a challenge, because you may just not get it right. So these are the reasons why you must allocate appropriately and ensure that each person understands why. And you don't need to hide whoever is doing the other one from the other, because there will be need for them to interface at some point to agree and review whatever they are coming up with. But the key thing there is that functions are delineated appropriately, and each person knows where each person's box stops. And that's what you see. For instance, in treasury operations, you won't have the treasurer reconciling your nostro accounts. You must assign it to somebody else entirely. Thank you very much.
Yes, before I take you up on some of the things you have said, I also want to mention that, fine, there's allocation of accounts. And then the allocation of accounts is done to ensure that there's segregation of duty, And I want to also assume that the allocation of such accounts, especially when the accounts reconciliation system is automated, it will also ensure that there is no single reconciling officer that is responsible for the process of data collection, matching, and reporting all to the end, and that all this can be segregated, all in terms of accounts allocation. But I want to take you up on one of the things that you mentioned. Number one, you said, sorry, Moshood, you said, you said that, you have like, say, 50 accounts you are reconciling, and let's assume that you have 5 reconciling officers, let's just assume, okay, and then you have allocated 10 accounts to each of them, let's just assume, all right, to each of them. Are you saying that if you allocate 10 accounts to Mr. A, he can also know some things in the 10 accounts you have assigned to Mr. B? I'm thinking that the reconciling officer for the next set of accounts should actually not know what A is doing. It is only their supervisor that should actually know what each of them is doing. What do you say? Or maybe I didn't hear you very well.
Okay, Philip, thank you very much. Very spot on. You see, like we said earlier too, there's no hard and fast rule to this thing. Depending on the organization, depending on the business involved, depending on the resources available to you, and again, depending on the desired outcome.
Yes.
You will have to manage this thing.
Okay.
But basically, you are spot on. You are not meant to know what the other person is doing because you must work independently. And I recall Dr. Okeremi mentioned that independence very clearly when he was talking at the initial stage. So you are correct. Okay. Independent operations is what you should have, but there will be times where they will have to interface. I think that's just it.
Okay. Yes. I want to call on Dr. Okeremi to look at, we are looking at control and supervision now as an essential part of the process for reconciliation. Okay. And we know that part of the things that people, supervisors or account manager actually enforce is setting timelines for reconciliation, timelines for review, and timelines for feedback to those that are stakeholders in the accounts that are being reconciled. Dr. Okeremi, can you please throw light on this?
Yeah, thank you very much. You see, the first problem we have naturally as managers is who is in charge. Naturally, the work of managers, ordinarily we call it controlling and directing. So we expect managers have reasonable independence and they have reasonable resources to determine what happens within their respective domains. But what happens in a situation where you call yourself the manager actually, but at the end of the day, you absolutely have no power or any control over what your subordinates are doing. I'll give an example. With respect to reconciliation. So somebody has done an accounts reconciliation using his own processes. All right? You know, probably used beautiful, you know, either manually or, you know, using some technology, Excel, and it comes to you as the supervisor. One of the things I've realized that what most supervisors ask for is, can you show me your reconciliation reports? And when people say, can you show me your reconciliation reports, what I have realized with my experience in industry is that they are usually asking for the outstanding items reports. And so when the outstanding items reports are presented by the subordinate that has done the exercise to the boss looks at all those outstanding items and sometimes he asks some questions. I don't know where those questions actually come from because he's asking questions based on evidence that has been presented to him. He does not have access to the entire life cycle of the process, like Moshood talked about earlier. He does not have access to the source data, neither does he have access to the processes of knocking off items, but now they are giving to him a series of outstanding items for him to vet and sign off. If you have ever signed any of those reports in your life and you are hearing me on this platform, I think you are very lucky that you haven't spent some days in jail. Because a lot of times, each time you sign that report, because what you are appending your signature to is concurring that you agree with this final output, which suggests that you agree with the entire process of the reconciliation. But in actual fact, it is impossible for you to know the entire process that your subordinates have gone through, except to start the process from the beginning again as the boss. And so the question here is, who is the real boss? You actually find that the answer is that the real boss is the guys who are doing the job. They are controlling you, they are managing you, you are not managing them.
Yeah.
Like a friend of mine said many years ago, he said it is either your account balances or you balance it.
Or the balance.
What that means
Wow.
is that, if the account does not balance naturally, you create, and these are pranks that people have played on their bosses, and the bosses sign.
Wow.
So essentially, people have put themselves in extremely difficult positions. And that's why when people talk about reconciliation, a whole lot of people actually term reconciliation to be the process of ticking entries. That's not reconciliation at all. Reconciliation is when you finally know the remedial action to be taken for each item that does not agree, and those decisions and actions are taken. And therefore, for you to be an effective manager, you need to have a set of tools and resources that guarantee that you can actually vouch not just for the finished product, but for the entire process without you being afraid.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Doctor. And I also want to add that, of course, in the supervisor relating with the accounting officers, of course, depending on the nature of the account, he will be able to set the timelines for the reconciliation, the frequency, the ones to be done daily, intraday, every other day, every week, and monthly. Set it and then use tools, of course, also as we have mentioned, to ensure that this is achieved. Short of time is really running. Moshood, in 2 minutes, just in 2 minutes. Now we have a lot of people doing some swapping on human resources. Okay, moving people from one department to the other. How does it, or how should this really be effected when you're talking about accounts reconciliation? Just in 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, like we all always say, no matter how best your system you put in place is, the people behind it again determines how those things come out. So when you need to move people, because it's inevitable at times, you must swap your resources. You must be very careful as to what they were doing currently before they move. There must be proper transition to ensure that outstanding items, like Dr. Okeremi mentioned, are not just seen to be ticked off. And if so, and again, it goes to what I said, that dual control and dual functionalities. You don't have one person doing just one thing for you forever. What if the guy resigns? What if he dies? I mean, inevitably, it will happen. So as a manager, you must understand people in your reconciliation decks are somehow very critical as much as every other person, but you must have a backup plan, and you must ensure you don't just swap people. Like I said, skill set, training, and all is required. If you lose time in reconciliation for a day or two for things you are meant to do daily, it may end up throwing the business off completely. So this is what I would say about swapping resources. You must ensure you do it properly and timely and efficiently as well. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much. Dr. Okeremi, just in 2 minutes too.
There's a very big problem about swappability of resources. Because you see, reconciliation is just one process that must start and end. You cannot do reconciliation from the middle. So if somebody has been doing the reconciliation of that account for maybe 2 years, and you need to
the reconciliation process, that's that particular question. That's the question on alert.
I don't know whether you can hear me or I went off. Hello?
I can hear you, doctor.
Okay. So what I'm saying is that if you move anybody that's doing the process, then that person is probably going away with institutional knowledge. Because remember, doing reconciliation, one of the things you have to understand about reconciliation officers, reconciliation is not a function for people when you want to punish them. It is a function for the smartest and the brightest in the organization. Because what happens in that place, that process called reconciliation is the final leg that ensures that the organization is actually safe of financial losses. So when people move from that desk to another function,
okay, yes.
So essentially, doing reconciliation effectively means you need to have a system that guarantees you are able to do what Moshood spoke about earlier, the ability to move people. Because if you don't have a system that guarantees that institutional knowledge is maintained at institutional levels, and institutional knowledge means understanding the process, the notion, and the principles behind the account. Those must be maintained at system level so that people can come, people can go, institution must remain. If you don't do that, swappability can become a very huge problem.
I think just to add to what Doctor has said while we wait for Philip, is the fact that, like I said earlier, reconciliation is very key. And if you lose time in terms of the next delivery date or the next delivery cycle, a lot could go wrong. So and again, you don't keep knowledge in human beings. You try to have institutional knowledge, like Doctor emphasized, so that at least at any point in time, because the inevitable happens, people can walk off the organization, people can pass on, and too many things can happen. So you should have that business continuity plan very effectively put in place for reconciliation at all times in your organization. I think that's just what I will add to that.
So there are about 2 questions I want to quickly things that we have taken. There is a question from Smart Omoabo. Number 1 question is talking about what are the processes for auto reconciliation. And I think we should actually answer that in terms of data matching and reporting. Those are the basic. Number 1 question is talking about data matching and second. And what's the difference between manual and auto reconciliation? Dr. Okeremi, in just half a second, difference between manual and auto reconciliation.
Well, you know, when we talk about auto reconciliation, well, the manual reconciliation is what all of us got to know. All of us were brought into the industry, and those of us that went through ICANN, that's all we were virtually trained in the traditional ICANN accounting and bookkeeping. But when we talk about automation of reconciliation, it means that we have the entire reconciliation life cycle from data gathering to report generation and to remedial action taking and recording. Everything online, everything on the system. That is the meaning of a fully automated reconciliation system. However, we have various shapes of this automation. So some people have tools that they use for matching. Some people have tools that they use for reporting and so on and so forth. But when you really want to talk about a real solid automated reconciliation system, the system must take care of the entire life cycle from data gathering, from data collection, all the way to analytics and remediation. That is the real meaning
and then reporting.
Automation.
Yes. Okay. I will call Moshood. Sorry, Dr. Kremi, are you done?
I'm done, sir.
Yes, thank you very much. I'll call on Moshood to answer this other question. It's from Alexander Exorum. I'm sorry if I wouldn't pronounce your surname very well. I said that we should please confirm if it's internal control or internal audit to be involved. So when we're talking about reconciliation, effective reconciliation, must the internal control or internal audit be involved in reconciliation function? And if they are or if they are not, what connection would these 2 people have when you were talking about management letter from external audit? I hope you got the question very well. Can you please attend to it in just 1 minute because of our time?
Oh, okay, yeah, thank you very much. I think, yeah, there's nothing wrong in internal control and internal audit being involved in reconciliation. In fact, in most organizations, they serve as the independent reconciliation desk officers because they're not meant to be part of your processing. And that's what we keep saying. The person that processes should not be the one reconciling. So you must segregate functions properly in your daily operations too, and make sure people are doing what is what. So that's why you don't have an internal auditor involved in your processes. They are meant to check what you have done and try to balance them and reconcile. That's what I would say in a nutshell. So there's absolutely nothing wrong. In fact, in most organizations, internal audit or internal control.
If I may chip in this dimension too, okay, you have a situation whereby the reconciliation function, it may be distributed or centralized. And when I say distributed, is that you have various department units carrying out functions, okay, and then at times it could be centralized. So you have the reconciliation units, and some will put it under internal control or internal audit, or some will just create a special reconciliation unit. So all reconciliation functions are being carried out. How does this affect the question that Alexander is asking? Moshood.
Well, at the end of the day, like we keep saying, there must be an executive control over what is happening across the departments, because whatever it is they are doing, you want to ensure that the organizational interest is represented and protected, and that is what matters most. So you can distribute it based on whatever you see that works best for you, but there must be that independent, superior knowledge or control that manages all those things. Different always from the sales or operations functions at all times.
Okay, so Dr. Okeremi, have a second. How does that impact on, or what connection does that have on the management letters from the external auditor?
Yeah, what management letters do is point out challenges or gaps within the operations of an organization. And management letters are expected to be remediated. So essentially, what Moshood has said is 100% correct. It is absolutely wrong for any organization to give the knife, the yam, and the mouth to the same person. So you must ensure that reconciliation, and we have to, and one of the challenges is because many organizations still do not know the seriousness of reconciliation. They think reconciliation, oh, just knock off items and let's move on. No. People need to understand that it is a control function and it is wrong for the persons involved in the transaction to ever be involved in the reconciliation and the checking. And the most positioned will be somebody who is independent. Now, organizations are at liberty to do what they please. So some may be A is checking B, B is checking C, and C is checking A, the round robin manner, which suggests distribution. But other organizations also say, no, we realize that this is such an important function and we are creating a separate unit under the internal control or under the internal audit function for reconciliation. Both are agreeable depending on your organization. But what is not acceptable is where the same people that are involved, anyone involved in the transaction is also involved in the reconciliation.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Okeremi. I will move to the major, second to the last point of this discourse, and that is on reporting. And just for a minute, there are some 5 things, characteristics of reports that we want to look at. And then we want to relate those 5 characteristics to reconciliation functions as practicable as we can. So we take each of those 5 characteristics one after the other. So Dr. Okeremi, when you say report is comprehensive enough in reconciliation. What does that mean in a minute?
Yeah, I mean, so the first and most important thing is that the reports must be actionable and they must be meaningful. So somebody sends a list of outstanding items reports. What does that mean? They have no meaning. So essentially, what we need are reports that are actionable. So if I see an item as being outstanding, I want to know what the probable reason why it is outstanding is and what the probable remedies are. Now, so those are operational reports. These are the minimum level of reports in reconciliation. What many people have not understood is that reconciliation itself can become an integral part for feedback into the operations and business itself. So, for example, when you get to senior levels of doing serious reconciliation, you begin to talk about analytical reports that actually are able to show you what your trends have been, what the gap analysis are. And these are things that smart business people can take advantage of. Then you are talking about reasonable value added of reconciliation into operations.
Thank you very much, Dr. Okeremi. Very comprehensive. So you have extended information about those transactions that interested stakeholders in that particular account will be able to use for feedback and for actions necessary to strengthen the system. Thank you very much. Moshood, in a minute, what do you understand or how do you explain when they say that a reconciliation report is timely? What does that mean?
Okay, thank you very much. Recall when we started, we mentioned some of the attributes of a reconciliation process. Timeliness is key. There are some accounts you must reconcile daily. There are some that are weekly,
Yes.
bi-weekly,
Yes.
monthly, quarterly.
Yes.
So if you don't do them appropriately at the right time,
Wow.
a lot will go wrong. And Dr. mentioned an example when he was talking earlier, especially when you have multi-currencies. Volatility of exchange rate is key. So if you don't reconcile and knock off the items, by the time you look at the figures or the books the next morning or the next period, if you have missed, exchange rate has moved and it causes a lot of confusion. And you know, again, like I said, report, you must act on it. So if you don't do it now, by the time you go to do the next reconciliation and act on it, rate has moved against you. So you have to be incurring losses and losses. So it is very, very timeliness is very key. You can't, so meaning that what is meant to be done daily, weekly, you must not miss it. Once you begin to miss out in the time schedule, there's a big problem waiting for you.
You are a donor. Okay, fine. So what you are saying, in essence, because the past 28 years, we've had a lot of clients and will-be clients. They will talk about backlog. It's a very common slogan. Backlog, backlog. So what you are saying, in essence,
I lost you.
Any organization,
absolutely spot on. If you recall, most of the
fine. So what do you mean?
A branch.
Okay, this for Dr. Reliability.
Yeah, you said, I can hear you.
Yes, I'm done. Yes, I'm done with timeliness. I'm okay with timeliness. All right. Yes, this is for Dr. Okeremi. Half a second. All right. Half a second, Dr. Okeremi. When you say report, reconciliation report is reliable, what does that mean?
In fact, the word I used is beyond reliable. I said actionable, which means that when the reports come out, the report, first of all, within the organization, there must be an agreement to the standard format of the report. So when the reports come out, if 15 people see the same report, they cannot give two interpretations. There must be one interpretation by all to that report. It's not that the one that you come and say, this is how we were doing it in Access Bank, and the other person says, this is how we are doing our own in Eco Bank, and the other one says, this is how we are doing our own when I was in Lafarge. No, it must be standard and unequivocal. So when we see it, we all understand what the report means. That's number one. Number two, it also means that the report that you are generating is as a result of the true activities from data gathering and matching and whatever you have done, so that you are sure that the reports cannot be compromised, either by including extraneous items or by suppressing genuine items. You need to institute a system that guarantees a straight true thing, that at any time you see a report, it is impossible for anybody to put in spurious items or remove items from it. And then each item on it, we all have the same understanding to what they mean. That is what I mean.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Okeremi. You had actually gone ahead to actually elaborate on another attribute of reconciliation report, which is consistency. Okay, and we take it for that consistency. And then the reliability is that once the reports are out, the content of that report is not subject to any litigation. You know the reports are reliable, and whatever figures that are thrown out, you know they are thrown out. There are no figures that have been replicated. There are no matching that have been done twice, and there are no transactions that have been omitted. Thank you very much, Dr. Okeremi. And Moshood, very clearly, just in a nutshell, half a second. So, systems-based, when you as a user. Sorry, Moshood, did you hear me?
Yeah, you're talking about system-based
reports. Yes.
Yeah, system-based report. I mean, let me just throw this example in, which will be clear to all of us. In the last few days, we've read in the news when the NSITF management claims termites hurt the vouchers for the transaction was 17 billion or thereabout. So it means because it's manual, it's paper, termites can eat it. If you have a system-based report, termites will not be able to eat your system-based. Now with cloud storage, you can store it anywhere, you can access it anywhere. If only NSITF had adopted a system-based reporting, I'm not sure we'll have the case of termites. So I think that just summarizes it. But what it means basically is you must go into where technology is what is reigning now and adopt it and use it to ensure it's there, accessibility, availability. Because when you talk of consistency, reliability, this has to be based on systems. Because if it's manual and all about human beings managing it, you will have a lot of misinterpretation, misunderstanding, misrepresentation. But if it's system-based, trust me, consistency will be there, reliability will be there, timeliness will be there. And that is why when you arrange the order of these articles, I think you knew what you were doing by placing system-based at the last point, because it wraps up all that all the previous items have done. So I give it up to you too, Philip, for arranging that in that order. Thank you very much.
So, Doctor, have a second. Have a second. Want to add to what Moshood has said on systems-based reports?
Moshood has said it spot on, but I want to use a colloquial language to describe it. When we talk about system-based reporting, it means that if, you see, when we do research, there's something we call reliability, which is what we've been talking about. It means, and what that means is that if 3,000 people ask for the same report 5,000 times, they will get exactly one version of the truth. It does not depend on people's emotions. It does not depend on their mood. It does not depend on their health. That is what we are discussing.
Absolutely.
So it is something that it doesn't matter who does it. It doesn't matter where he does it from, where she does it from. It doesn't matter where she does it. You get the same version of truth. There's only one way that is possible, when it is systematized.
When Eileen, for the last question.
Okay. Thank you, Doctor, for that. Our time is fast spent. And lastly, we'll be talking about archiving, and I'll call on Mr. Adelotan to talk about that. Sir, please, what do you understand by archiving?
Okay, it goes back to the last comment about system-based, because archiving means you keep records and preserve it for eternity, and availability for people to access at any point in time from anywhere in this part of the world. And that is what archiving means. You don't keep records that after 2 years you cannot access it, or after 6 months it's not available, or dependent on one mood or emotion. Archiving means ability to have your report and your reconciliation documentation or approach available, accessible at any point in time in a reliable and valid and comprehensive format. Once you have that and satisfy that, then you achieve an efficient archiving process. One of the challenges you see with archiving in most places is retrieval. You don't archive in an haphazard manner where you know, like you go into a jungle scavenging for information or an item or a report. So you must archive in a proper format, in a sequence that makes sense, so that retrieval is easy and achievable in less than no time. I think that's what I would say about archiving. Thank you.
Dr. Okeremi, have a second on that, on archiving.
I don't think anybody can add to what Dr. Moshood has submitted in that field, to be honest. Because the beauty, the thing is that there is only one reason for archival, and the reason is retrieval. So if you archive information and it is not easy to retrieve, then you might as well forget about archiving it. So when you are saying you are archiving, bear in mind the ability to retrieve. And therefore, the only way to do these things is to archive your records where termites and worms will not devour it.
And snakes.
Not devour.
So when the Bible says, set your treasures in heaven, where worms and insects will not devour it, is probably referring to store, archive your records in the cloud where termites and snakes and monkeys cannot access it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much, Dr. Keremi. Half a second. This is also for you, Dr. Keremi. There's a question here. You know, Dr. Keremi mentioned something the other time that if an account does not balance, you balance it. And somebody is asking this question: how can you avoid this? Because it is actually dangerous.
Yes, there's only one way to do that, honestly. That is systematization and end-to-end automation. That's what I said. And that's why I said, when talking about automation, we've seen all sorts of mediocre attempts at automation, automating a part of it. If you want to avoid a situation where anybody can play innovative accounting on you, you need to have a system that automates the reconciliation process from the life cycle, from beginning to the end.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Keremi. And it's been a quite an exciting moment that we've all had here. And there are some few other questions, but because of time, okay, I will not be able to answer them. But please feel free to get in touch with us. It is time to be able to answer your question on one basis. And go to our website and we'll see more information about PFS. And if you want to invite us, we are free, we are available anytime to answer your call. I want to say a very big thank you to Moshood for finding time, as always, being here. And of course, our dear Dr. Yele Okeremi for giving us this beautiful session. I also want to thank our people in the support room at the back office doing a great job, that we have enjoyed today. I want to intimate us that the next edition will be coming up on the 15th of September. So you can block that date, the same time, 11 and 12, 11 a.m. and 12 noon. That will be on the 6th edition. And the topic will be considering will be accounts reconciliation, use of automation tools. You will realize that in this particular session, we discussed a lot about automation. So the next edition is going to be strictly on automation tools, use of automation tools to achieve reconciliation. Reconciliation tools as independent or as satellite or as inbuilt in your core accounting system on the 15th of September. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much, audience. I will see you there. Thank you. Cheers. Moshood, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Keremi,
thank you. Cheers.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. See you September 15th. Cheers. Cheers.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Enlightened and enjoyable.
Yeah.
Bye.
God bless you all. Bye.